Okay, so for this online learning experience, we're going to start preparing for the growth mindset um, project, and I'm going to give you some. I know it seems like such a great idea, and I think at its core it is, but I'm going to kind of give you some of the arguments against using growth mindset or relying too much on growth mindset. I'm pretty sure that most of these people wouldn't say it's necessarily bad, just so much as it's not the only way that we need to consider motivating and helping students. Okay, so what I wanted to do today then is I want to give you a little bit like some of the counter arguments towards growth mindset and kind of get you prepared to start thinking about writing your critique for your paper, getting you started on the paper. All right, so what I wanted to show you is last October, as I was getting ready and writing up this assignment, I did a search at ASCD, which is the Associations for the Supervision of Curriculum Design. It's one of the largest organizations on curriculum and instruction and for principals in the world. And when I looked up growth mindset in their online marketplace, there was actually 870 results. So there are 870 resources, blog posts, articles about growth mindset. So that's an awful lot. You also, when you look up growth mindset, you're going to see a lot of schools, such as this school, Cedar Grove Elementary School, which I forget which state it is in, but very prominently talking about themselves as a growth mindset-oriented school. And you can see that growth mindset. This is the homepage of the elementary school, and you can see growth mindset was, prominently displayed on the front of their website for parents in the community to see. It is definitely an industry. When you look up growth mindset, you can see that there are all kinds of organizations out there that have developed curriculum that can be purchased by schools with all kinds of things like anchor posters and progress progress monitoring, things like that, lessons that you can get. So there is a lot of money and a lot of time going into this idea of growth mindset. And there, like anything, you have to be careful about things that get too commercialized, which I think is really one of the reasons why we started to see this sort of increased scrutiny of growth mindset. Okay, so then the question becomes, schools are literally spending lots of money, and we know that schools have limited resources right now. This is a time of contraction, not a time of expansion for school funding. So the question becomes, does it work? And last fall, there was actually a case study, or a study that Case Western Reserve researchers did, where they did a meta-analysis, and they did two different studies. A meta-analysis means that they aggregated all the information from hundreds and hundreds of studies and analyzed whether or not those 100 studies of growth mindset to analyze whether or not growth mindset worked. One of the study's authors said this research was important because millions of dollars have been spent on growth mindset interventions in the schools. And so that was really this idea that this has become quite an industry was really part of the reason why the authors chose to look at growth mindset. In the first study, they measured academic achievement using course grades, GPA, course exams, and standardized test scores from more than 400,000 students who were studied in 273 studies. The second study looked at the effect of growth mindset interventions for 5,155 students from 43 studies to explore whether growth mindset interventions improved academic achievement. So these were two meta-analyses. They pulled together a whole bunch of studies to see. The result, we found limited evidence for mindset theory, and the evidence varied by specific claims, says Brooke McNamara, who co-authored the study. For example, overall, we found a significant but weak relationship between growth mindsets and academic achievement, and a significant but small effect of growth mindset interventions on academic achievement. So one of the things they're saying is students who have a growth mindset do have a somewhat better student achievement. And then those students that had interventions that were growth mindset oriented, there was small effect for them on their academic achievement. So the mindset they came in did affect their achievement to a very slight degree, and creating interventions that tried to develop a growth mindset had small effect on their overall achievement. So this study really came to fruition, sort of a bubbling of a lot of criticism that have been happening through the years as more and more schools have looked to growth mindset as a way to address learning gaps and student motivation. So one of the really important criticisms that people have is that it fails to address the issues of poverty, institutional and structural problems such as racism. And so one of the articles that I was looking at when I was looking at critiques of growth mindset, somebody said, consequently, we routinely demand of children in the worst situations in life, through no fault of their own, that they somehow set aside those lives when they magically walk into school and behave in ways, growth mindset grit, that few adults do who are also burdened by forces more powerful than they are. So this idea that students come in with a growth mindset and that we can ask them to develop this growth mindset when essentially, really, this is looking at Maslow's hierarchy of needs when those being needs are not being met, that is problematic and probably wrong. Another criticism that I said is that it only looks at individual causes for success or failure. So this researcher said, as a colleague noted during comments after the keynote, this is a very American way of thinking, and I would add a flawed view of the relationship between human behavior and social forces. This relates back to the first one, and what this person is saying is that there are often some systematic and institutional causes for failure. For instance, students maybe are set up to fail because the schools are not, say, culturally relevant to them, and that becomes a problem. And it's not about an individual, it's not about the student as an individual and their growth mindset as individuals, but it's more about school as an institution. Another criticism that people have is that Carol Dweck, who is really the kind of architect of this idea of growth mindset, that the research that she uses was flawed. According to researchers, a number of the studies investigating the effectiveness of growth mindset interventions did not follow best practices for experimental research. So Carol Dweck, her big claim to fame, she's the one that went into a fifth grade math class, demonstrated that those students that got growth mindset interventions actually performed better than those that had not. Some of researchers are coming out saying that her methods are flawed. Another criticism that comes out is schools should allocate their limited resources to more effective reforms because of the amount of money that is going into training for teachers and growth mindset, strategies for growth mindset, some of the programs that I was talking about. This actually goes back to the study from Case Western Reserve, Stuart Ritchie, who was one of the authors, co-authors. He collaborated with them from University of Edinburgh. He said the results of the study make teachers, many of whom are very interested in the topic of mindset and have changed their teaching practices because of it, seriously reconsider the amount of time, effort, and resources their school invests in promoting growth mindsets in their students, he says. The benefits appear to have been substantially oversold. Another criticism, the education itself cannot support growth mindset. So this idea that we are saying all of this to kids, but then we're putting them into a system that's grade-oriented, that has end-of-course exams, that has air tests, that has SATs and ACTs at the end of their junior year, all of these things kind of don't support the idea of a growth mindset. So we are currently in a school climate obsessed with performance in the form of constant summative testing, analyze and ranking of students. Schools create a certain cognitive dissonance when they proselytize the benefits of growth mindset in assemblies, but then hand out fixed target grades and lessons based on performance. So it's this idea that we really are not, we're saying that we're growth mindset oriented, but then when we're so performance oriented in the way that we assess, that really that's a problem. And another criticism, it underestimates the importance of an innate ability and the advantages that come with it. So here's an example. For the U.S. psychiatrist Scott Alexander, if a fixed mindset accounts for underachievement, then poor kids seem to be putting in a heck of a lot less effort than in a surprisingly linear way. And so one of the things that he's talking about is just like how kids from Advantage, how they are sort of innately oriented towards achievement in school because of things that were outside of their control. And that really we cannot say that. We know that this idea that poor kids are not putting in the same kind of effort, that's totally false. That's him being sarcastic. And so he's saying, growth mindset isn't accounting for this idea that there are advantages that certain kids enter school with. Okay, So I'm going to have you listen to a really interesting interview from a professor, okay, who challenges this idea of growth mindset. So I'm going to play this. This is an audio.
Praising students for their effort, not their ability, is the core of a new teaching strategy called Growth Mindset. It contends that acknowledging perseverance and improvement fosters hardy and resilient students. But that strategy is not enough, according to Dr. J. Luke Wood, who teaches the Black Minds Matter class, a focus on Black boys and men in education at San Diego State University. He says that underserved community is starving for clear affirmations of their talent and ability. Joining me is Dr. J. Luke Wood, professor of community college leadership at San Diego State University. And Professor Wood, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
The concept of growth mindset has spread through teaching circles like wildfire and is really seen as a game changer in how society thinks about learning. Do you think that it can be helpful for some kind of students?
Yes, I think in general there are some elements to growth mindset that are beneficial. The idea that you should be validating and praising students for their effort is important. However, my contention is that when we're talking about students who are from historically underserved groups, such as our black males, in which the course in this conversation came out of, we have to recognize that they don't always receive validation that ever affirms their ability. And so for us, we think it's important that there be a complement validating both effort and validating their ability. It's part of what we call the D3 effect, the three different ways in which black males are approached in the classroom. The first D is distrust. They're viewed oftentimes as criminals or deviants. Disdain. They're viewed in a way that we pathologize their cultures and assume that they come from communities that are lesser than. And disregard, where we assume that they are academically inferior. And that last D is where we're focusing on here. We believe it's important to validate students and to tell them, you know what, we believe in you.
Professor Wood, tell us about your research that affirms the importance of praising ability.
Yeah, so I partner with a colleague, Dr. Frank Harris III, here, and we operate a center called the Community College Equity Assessment Lab. And one of the things we do is survey students in community colleges across the country to examine what are factors that influence their success. And one of the things that we collect is looking at validation, but we look at a specific aspect of validation, which is validating ability, because again, we believe it's important to do so. And what we found in our research is that when you do that, when you validate a student's ability, they have greater confidence in their academic abilities. They perceive college to be more worthwhile. They have a more authentic interest in what they're learning. They are more focused in school, and so there are benefits we see from our research, tangible benefits of validating ability. Again, that's not to say that we shouldn't validate effort as well. We just believe that you have to have both.
Now, the proponent of this concept, educator Carol Dweck, is white. And do you believe that male students of color face challenges in school that many white researchers perhaps don't take into account?
I think that's really what the heart of this issue is. There's so many theories in education and across other fields as well that have been put forward by well-meaning and well-intentioned white researchers who want to do the right thing and who are looking for ways to better help students. But because of their lens and maybe a lack of understanding of how certain experiences play out for black boys or other populations, their theories aren't always applicable. And this is a really good example. In her research, she really assumes the fact that a student has been validated for their ability. But we're talking about a population where that doesn't always happen. And actually, as part of the Black Minds Matter course, we've been looking at other theories that are similarly incomplete. And so we don't want to say these theories are wrong, but they're incomplete if we're looking at populations of color and our underserved students. And we have to have a more holistic perspective that accounts for their experiences with racism, their experiences with stereotypes, and these assumptions that we employ that really make it so what would be normally a great theory is just not really that applicable to them.
We contacted Carol Dweck about your critique of the growth mindset. And Dr. Dweck sent us a statement which reads in part, I welcome Dr. Wood's input and his deeply informed perspective. In fact, last week before his article came out, I had this very discussion with my undergraduate class. We agreed that for some students, especially those laboring under negative stereotypes about their ability, reassurance about ability can be important. And I'd like your reaction to that statement.
Well, I really appreciate the thoughtful response. I also recognize that it is a shift in the prior statements that have been made by Dr. Dweck and in numerous articles that she's written, op eds, and in terms of how it's even being received by the educational community. So I appreciate the fact that she has softened that stance and recognized that there is a need for balance and that it may not always apply to all populations. Again, it is a shift. And so I think that it's important for us to get that message out there to the educational community because here's what's happened. I go to schools, I go to colleges, I go to universities, and I have the privilege of talking with educators. And the first thing they say is, oh, yeah, well, we have to be validating their effort. And again, that's important. But again, if you're dealing with a population who doesn't receive a more complete message, we're in some ways doing damage and doing harm to populations that have never been told, you know what, you're brilliant. You have the ability to do this.
Luke Wood, I don't want you to leave before you give us an update on the success that you've had with the Black Minds Matter class. Tell us about that.
So when we started Black Minds Matter, we had hoped that there would be a good reception. So again, it's a course that seeks to raise the national consciousness about issues facing our Black boys and men in education. And so what we've done is we've taken a course that I'm teaching here at San Diego State University, and we've opened it up to the public, and we're live streaming it across the country. When we set out to do this course, we were hoping there'd be maybe 1,000, 2,000 people who would be participating. We have over 10,000 people who are registered and counting.
I have been speaking with Professor J. Luke Wood, a professor of community college leadership at San Diego State University and creator of the Black Minds Matter class. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, so that was an important, very important critique that's kind of recent. This idea that when we only orient our praise towards effort, that may be problematic for some students who maybe have never been told that they actually have ability. And so that's something that I find that resonates very strong with me, especially when we're talking about underserved populations. And so you'll notice, when we look at our prompt, even he didn't dismiss outright. I think it would be hard pressed for you to say growth mindset itself is completely wrong. But he definitely did it has some potential but type of statement. And that's really where you're going to have to think, because you want to think about how the critiques so far connect with your understanding of growth mindset. So let's look at what we're going to be doing with your task then. Your task then this comes right out of the assignment sheet, which is loaded on Leo, which I did give you a copy of. But just to help you, so you're going to answer this question: to what extent might using the strategies outlined in the growth mindset playbook support all learners in the classroom? And so you want to think about the class. So some of the things that you want to consider is learning theory, student development, student diversity, exceptional learners, and student motivation. Your essay must address at least 3 concepts directly discussed in the psychology textbook, presentations, or readings to support, challenge, or qualify the idea central to the growth mindset strategies, okay? So what's going to happen? We're going to have 2 days that you can come for help. I am going to not require these. These are up to you. If you think that you can do this without any input, that's up to you. But please know that 1/3 of your grade is the major assignments, and that means that 1/3 of your grade is going to be this assignment and then the one that you'll do at the end of the semester. And so on 228 or 226, we'll do our last mind mapping day, and I'll have some time to start talking about the answer questions. And then on 226, and then on 228, there's going to be I'll be in the classroom for drop-in help. I won't have class. There's no scheduled class. That's for anybody who wants to come in for help, okay? But today's homework and what will be due before class on Monday will be that you create a simple outline of your project. In this outline, I need you to write your thesis, identify your evidence. And in the next few slides, I'm going to write a sample of a part of an outline, just what it might look like. Does not mean that yours has to look like this, but all right. So I might create my pre-write and write my thesis. Thesis is something that I'm going to require that you have. So here's the thesis that I wrote. In psychology, cognitive motivational theories of learning support the use of growth mindset strategies in the classroom. But teachers must remember that all students have different goal orientations and social needs that must be addressed first. So I used 3 concepts out of psychology class. One of them was from when we were talking about developmental theories, because I'm going to go into Maslow and the hierarchy of needs and the being needs. And then I'm going to talk about goal orientation and cognitive motivation. Okay? Now I'm just going to show you what my, the first thing everyone wants to, or everyone should, introduce what growth mindset is. So before you get into your argument, you want to define growth mindset. Give your reader some understanding, share it so that the reader is coming to your argument knowing what you mean when you say growth mindset, okay? Because it is a term that has like lots of different uses, and you want to be very specific. This is what I mean. So I would write, my first paragraph would be what is growth mindset, and I would say a belief that one can improve and learn. And then what I did was I chose to take from my slides some of the the quotes that I might use, the textual evidence that I might use. So my first paragraph then is, what is growth mindset? My second paragraph is, what are growth mindset strategies? Kind of identifying so that, so I'm not even getting into my argument yet. I'm just identifying for the reader. In the book, Growth Mindset Strategies, the author uses several techniques for developing growth mindsets. And then I would talk about some examples. Teaching students to recognize fixed mindset triggers, avoiding shaming, teaching children directly about brain plasticity or metacognition, offering opportunities to grow from failure, developing places for students to feel included. And then I would talk about, these are the places where I would go for my textual evidence. I had it on page 25 and page 97, 2 quotes that I would want to use in this paragraph where I'm defining what the strategies are. So I have my thesis, I have my definition, I have my explanation of what the strategies are, and now I'm going to move into my actual, so paragraph 3 or part 3, I don't even know that these have to be paragraphs, but so the first thing I want to look at is the cognitive approaches to motivation, because if you look at my thesis, that's what I said. And so my topic sentence might go something like, growth mindset strategies help address a student's thinking, an important aspect of cognitive theories of motivation. And so when I am in this topic, I would talk about attribution theory, the idea of internal versus external causes, stable versus unstable causes, and controllable versus uncontrollable causes. And I would talk about how motivation is decreased when a student sees causes of failure as stable and uncontrollable. Then I would talk about what strategy specifically addresses attribution theory. And so I would look at chapter 3, the idea of brain plasticity, where students learn that they can learn. They kind of learn like the biology behind learning. I would talk about chapter 5, the path to success, where teachers are coached to give students chances for them to learn from failure and chances to retry. And then in chapter 7, I would go back to that human connection, where the teacher helps the student control their anger and cause a failure. I see failure spelled wrong there, through empathy. So that idea there is that the students would be able to, I'm going to fix this because this is going to drive me crazy, that the students would be able to control that anger, because attribution theory talks about this idea that students, if they don't feel like they have any control, their anger goes up. And so teachers can help to control that anger by developing empathy and a human connection with their students. Okay, so that's, roughly how your outline. I don't care what it looks like. This isn't a writing class, and I respect your ability to pre-write in a way that is appropriate for you personally. But I do want all of you to turn in a pre-write that outlines your plan for the paper. You can use the example here to guide you, or you can do something totally different. But here are the things I do want. I do want to know what your thesis is. How do you plan to address the prompt? I do want to know how you're going to give an overview of growth mindset, and probably what the strategies are. And then I do want to know what 3 psychology terms and connections you plan to use in your assignment. Beyond that, the level of detail that you include in this pre-write is up to you. I will offer feedback for you, and I'd like you to have this uploaded to Leo by the start of class Monday. It's 2/24, isn't it? I think I got that date wrong. Monday, 2/24. So, so that will be, you'll have that in there, and sorry about these little typos. So 224. And then we will work towards, because your project itself is going to be due on March 2nd, and we can spend a significant amount of time next week. On the 24th, we're going to look at a student motivation. We're going to have an assessment on student motivation, and then the 26th and the 28th are going to be dedicated towards getting you ready for this growth mindset project. All right, if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I will see you on Monday.